Hello, my name is Gemma, and this is your podcast, Cosmic Woman. Make yourself feel right at home. Allow your heart to expand and your mind to be at peace. We are all one. That's why this is an invitation to listen with your whole being, as if it was you telling your own narrative. Make each episode an opportunity to ask yourself, who am I being as I listen? I bring this podcast to you with so much love and devotion. That love that is you. A very warm welcome to this new interview episode of Ella Cósmica, the very first interview we are doing in English. And it's a delight to introduce you to Alisha Richard. Alisha is part of the Masterpiece of Resilience documentary currently being filmed in July 2025 as we record this podcast. In January 2023, Alisha embraced her authentic self, risking everything she had built in her life, from her marriage to her job, family, and friends. Her transition fueled a personal transformation that brought to the public her writing, public speaking, and artist talents. Through her poetry and storytelling, she shares her most difficult episodes in her life. Alisha defines herself as a dynamic person who defies stereotypes that people have about women and transgender folks. Her main tools are her disarming vulnerability and contagious joy. Hello, Alisha. Welcome to Ella Cósmica.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to have you too. You are our first interview in English. So far, Ella Cósmica has been open only to Spanish speakers, and through a divine intervention, misunderstanding, here we are, opening the show to interviewing women in English too. And I'm really delighted. So thank you for being the catalyst to the expansion of Ella Cósmica to new worlds, and not only the world of English speakers, but also the world of gender diversity, because that's a huge part of your story, right?
It's just one of those things that seems just right up like the way my path has kind of played out over the last 2 years. It's like finding your podcast and you being willing to open it up to an English interview when you've previously just done everything in Spanish. It just seems like apropos for how things have played out for me. Um, I feel like, some people tell me one person in particular at a bar when I was performing at an open mic said, "Your message is bigger than you. You must keep sharing it." And the more I share the message, the more opportunities seem to open up. So I'm so excited to be here and talk about, anything you want to talk about. But yeah, uh, it's really, being someone who hadn't really explored their gender, repressed any thoughts of it for years, not really actively like, oh, I think I'm a woman, but it's like I knew that there were things that made me uncomfortable. I just didn't want to think about. And then when I finally did embrace who I was, how much it opened up everything else in my life and really inspired me to not hold back in anything.
That's beautiful. We met through a common contact, Heather, who is working on her documentary masterpiece of resilience. And in this documentary, she features stories of transgender in general, stories that the world was not ready to hear until now, as she says on the documentary website. She also says that identity is not a choice, but the courage to live it. Alicia, tell us about your experience on this documentary so far.
Yeah, so I mean, we're still working on the
Mhm.
documentary. It's we went through phase one of filming, and I think, initially she was what Heather was looking for are gender nonconforming people. We also have at least one non-binary person on the cast, and I know that there were a couple of other people that were potentially going to be on the cast that were non-binary. Um, but she was looking not just to do a documentary uh, on gender nonconforming people, but really creative people who really I think the fact that we're gender nonconforming has played into our creativity. And that's definitely been true for me. And, it's we each are telling our own story and trying to be part of a bigger theme for the documentary. And for me, I have an atypical story for a lot of transgender people in this day and age. I It's a story of acceptance by the people closest to me, and I
Mm.
know that that has definitely not been the case for so many trans folk that I've met and non-bi. So I've tried to share that part of my that part of my transition, but also I have talked about the transformation and really embracing the fact that I've written for decades, and to the audience that I was willing to share my writing for many years, um, they always found they loved what I wrote. They said I should write more. They encouraged me to get published, and I put this, it's like, nope, not going to do that. Just too frightened, too scared to move forward in a lot of aspects of my life. And then accepting who I was helped me open up like other parts of my life. What else am I holding back? And I realize now the choice to start sharing and then do it through poetry, which I had never really been a poet. I had written, I I would say I wrote a lot of poetic prose, but it was very much prose and focused character sketches and things like that, but always very flowery language. But wanting to find poetry or finding poetry because I found that it was an opportunity where there are lots of venues where you can read a poem, and wanting to share my story and the feelings that I was feeling. It's almost more important than my story itself. Is just how I've embraced myself and the joy that that's brought me. And it's led to so many great conversations with complete strangers. And I keep finding people. Even this week, I went to something completely different, but I met someone and they said that they were trying to host events at their home. You know, it's sort of bring art to the home, and she's a dancer, and I said, oh well, I do poetry. I said, I did my own one woman show. Let's talk about, can I do something, maybe a shortened version? And she's like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. And we had just met at this other event. It happened to be at a uh, LGBTQ theater in San Diego, so we already had some common ground that brought us there. uh, but I'm not afraid to talk about anything, and it just leads to so many conversations and opening opening doors, not necessarily doors for me, but opening doors for communication.
I think that's why you're so magnetic, because you are talking to you, you're very magnetic. That's because you're not afraid, full stop. You're not afraid to talk about anything, and very open. That makes you, I feel, very magnetic. Has your writing or your poetry changed after your transition
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to even think what it was like. So
before?
again, the only poetry I had written before transition was a little bit of children's poetry when my kids were really little, and they're now 27 and 25. So that was decades ago also. The type of writing, I didn't sh I would share my observations, and people, that I shared the writing with, generally close family and some friends, they loved my take on the world, the way I characterize things. Sometimes it was about myself, it was my own observations, but I didn't bring a lot of my feelings into it. And now with the poetry, it's all about my feelings and just the self. I have a lot of poems that are they're almost storytelling in the level that they're autobiographical, but it's like, talking about how all the, especially as I was going through early transition, how I was feeling about it and the excitement and that discovery. And I felt like I never wanted to share at that personal level before. I wrote a lot of journal art, I lots of journaling about that. And when I say journaling, I've never been someone who's kept a daily journal, but when I do write things down, it's often very flowery language. It may not be, I don't know what a typical person's journal looks like, but it would be like I'd be inspired to write something and I go back and look at it and it's like, oh, that's almost poetic. I don't know if I'll go back and ever share those writings. It was a very different perspective in life, but that was the only time I would share my feelings was sort of in private for me. Sometimes share it with my spouse when, it's like if I felt like, it was something powerful and I wanted her to know about it. But so yeah, that's been the big change is that focus going from more observations to feelings. And I just feel I'm a much more feeling person now.
That's beautiful. You mentioned, and we talked about it when we first met, that your family was very acceptance of your transition or your situation. Did that make things easier or more difficult for you?
It definitely made things easier because I've met a number of people who haven't had any acceptance, and they feel like they're alone in the world.
Yeah.
Their family is their adopted family that are often other, trans or LGBTQ people. Um, the complication really that did come out of it is, I'd say, the most important people to me that I really had hoped would support me were my wife, my two boys, and my mom. And I'm close to all of them. And we my older son was living out of town at the time and still is. My younger son was still living at home. My mom has always lived in the same city as me in San Diego. So, and I see her at least on a weekly basis. And it was interesting. Her initial I initially came out to her and told her I was wearing women's clothing because I wasn't quite sure yet, and I wanted to tell her sooner than later because I felt, especially on when I was away from work, that's when I wanted to explore. And she was a little uncomfortable with that, and she's like, "Well, how's her big question was how's this going to affect your marriage?" It's like she loves me, she loves my wife as a couple and as individuals, and I think she was worried like if your marriage fails, then I'm going to lose someone who's really close to me. Spoiler alert, that hasn't happened. My wife and my mom are still really good friends, even though my wife and I are getting divorced now. But on the other hand, my wife initially was really supportive. In fact, when I first came out to her, which was very early in my own process, and I just thought I was cross dressing at that point in time, but I wanted to take a bolder step and start wearing fully dressing as a woman. And my wife's initial reaction was she was shocked, but then she stepped out of the room where we were talking, came back and gave me a dress and asked if I wanted to try it on. She thought it had a form that could fit me, even though I was much different body shape than hers. And I did. And that was like instant gender euphoria. That is such a pivotal moment. And she realized that she wasn't sure what she was doing, but she wanted to be supportive, and she has been supportive from day one. And she quickly realized that this wasn't going to be good for our marriage because she saw that authenticity coming out like right away. Even before, I mean, she'll tell me, I knew you were trans before you admitted it to yourself. And I think it's not that she knew from before, but she just saw this complete transformation in my personality. And so because that initial reaction was so supportive, it sent me kind of down this road for several months where I thought, even when she was pulling back, I thought, well, she's going to come around. I've become the best version of myself. I've I've never been a joyful person. I've been a person who experienced some happiness, a little bit of highs and low, but for the most part, just not someone who would spread joy, not someone who you would say has a magnetic personality. And when I just let myself lean into who just was coming out and what felt right, it was a very different type of personality and very feminine. And at that point, my wife realized that this wasn't going to be, we weren't going to be able to survive. And it took me several months to get there. And about a year in is when we formally decided to get divorced. And that's almost the process takes a while. So that process is almost done. And we're still friends. And that's, I think I got to the point where it's like, okay, if we can't remain partners, can we remain friends? And I'm so happy. And then the flip side is my mom over time, she she played into the joy and the happiness, and she had never seen me that way in my adult life. And she realized if this is what's driving it, then I need to accept it. And we now have the best version of our relationship that I can remember. Um, she's 88. The fact that she came around so quickly, I think exceeded my expectations. I hope that she would accept my transition, but she moved into a retirement community, and it never gets old when she introduces me. This is my daughter, Alisha. It's, and uh, she, it just rolls off her tongue like she's always been saying it. And it's, she had 57 years calling me her son. So it was a big change for her, but it for her, it's like she came around and she's been super supportive, always worried about my safety, and still is concerned. And she, if I say I'm going to go somewhere, it's like, be safe, she would have never said that before. It's like just typical situations. Like I go to certain neighborhoods for open mics. It's like, oh, that's, that neighborhood's not such a nice neighborhood. Yeah, it's fine, mom. It's like the people there are good. And she also knows that women in this world face danger in situations we shouldn't. So, I respect that, but it's like it hasn't been an impediment. Whereas up at front, I think her protectiveness felt like it was going to be an impediment, and she needed time for it to sink in.
It's not easy to accomplish that, all those things, to have peace with your mom and have a wonderful relationship and end up a marriage of so many years in such a conscious and an open way. It's very beautiful. And it's very interesting as well how the world now is a more dangerous place now that you're a woman, or at least people from outside feel that way. Um, have your world changed in any other ways now that you're a woman? Do we know that in a world made for men and by men, men have certain privileges, right? Right.
Absolutely.
Has that changed in any way?
It's interesting because I would say by and large, most of my good friends are cisgender women. And some of them have met me only post transition, and some of them have known me for years before, and some of them have worked with me as both. And one of the things that they, several of them have noted is I do not have the trauma, if you will, of growing up and developing as a woman, um, and being sometimes beaten down by society and the patriarchy. And I never felt like I was part of the patriarchy. I always felt uncomfortable with groups of men, but I saw it and tried to call it out, but probably was, just barely an ally. I could have been a lot stronger. I didn't use my voice. I decided to start using my voice now. I know I don't come from the level of privilege, but I also don't walk into a room expecting anyone to think of me as a lesser than them, whether they're a woman or a man. And I think the way I carry myself, I I work in a mixed environment. There's lots of women and men. But some of the men that I work with, they're in traditional roles. I work with some project managers and on some projects that are like construction based projects and sort of, realms that have always been men's realms. And I don't feel like I see or feel people dismissing me. That's not to say that, it may be happening, but I don't feel it as overtly as some of my friends who've described, situations they've been in. My wife, I mean, we talked about this a lot during her career. She's always worked in a male dominated field. And I know the type of discrimination and dismissiveness more than anything that she's experienced over that time. And so I feel fortunate that I haven't been knocked down. And I do know that I walk through the world much differently now. I am so much more cautious. I, I tell people when I'm going somewhere, where I'm going, when I expect to be leaving, when I'm out and about. I, I'm constantly, I used to walk with my dog and have my earbuds in, not anymore. It's like I need to have, she's very alert, but it's like I need to have my full alertness. So I used to love listening to podcasts at night when we were doing our nighttime walk, and it, might extend for 45 minutes. Now it's very much I stay in a safe zone around I live in a condominium complex. There's an apartment complex right next to us. Basically just walk within those two complexes, hoping that all my neighbors are safe. But it's like not knowing, I want to be out on the open street. And it's a beautiful, I'm in a neighborhood that has a lot of beautiful places I could be walking, but I don't walk those type of places alone anymore. And I feel that more than anything else when I used to do a lot of hiking. And I'm really cautious. Like, do I want to hike on my own? And I don't carry anything extreme that could protect me. And so I generally only hike in places that are fairly, that I know are well-trodden paths. There will be lots of other people, and I'll go out at times where I expect there's going to be other people.
Mm.
And I used to not think about those things at all.
Contrast of lives, right? After your transition,
Yeah.
fear is now real, and you understand, and people can understand how women feel just by being alone at night.
Yeah, and I've never dismissed my women friends when they would talk about safety issues.
Mm.
That's something I felt like I had a couple of women in graduate school who really helped me understand how scary it is to be a woman in the world. And, I look back at some of my college days and some of the people I was around and the men I was around their behavior towards women. And I absolutely believe the women. Because, it's like I saw men behaving badly and not, and, congratulating each other for it. And so I remember going with some friends to, I think it was a Take Back the Night rally, for women who had suffered sexual assault. And it was very powerful. And it again, I think uh, my women friends wanted me to experience that because it's one thing to hear about stories, another thing to hear a victim tell her story. And and I think, you know, having that was decades ago, and only heard more stories since. It's like I can't dismiss that and say just because I feel like at work or wherever I feel safe, the world is a less safe place for a woman than a man. And being a very tall woman, I'm 6'2", that doesn't mean anything if you're a transgender woman. You're still a huge target. In fact, you might be a bigger target because you're easier to spot.
Wow.
In San Diego, we have a lot of, there's a huge Hispanic population,
Yeah.
and folks who have origins from family in Mexico and Central America, they tend to be a lot smaller. So trans women are maybe someone's 5'6". They just blend in. It's versus me, it's like I like to wear heeled boots most of the time, so I walk around the world as a 6'4" woman, and I stand out. And I
Yeah.
know that because I shop in my little area, and like people at the stores will recognize me. It's like, do you recognize everyone, or do I really just I'm wearing a dress after work and somewhat striking in appearance, so it really stands out. And I don't mind that because I feel like if I feel like I can hide and blend in, that's going to give me a false sense of security that I don't want to have. I still stay alert even when I'm being very visible.
Let's talk a bit about your show, Alicia's Light, right? Performance. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so I started doing poetry in 2023, and it was mostly about my journey, and then it was also about some moments in my life where I had overcome some, like, really finally process things as a 57-year-old that have happened years earlier, including a childhood sexual assault that I had never really admitted to anyone other than a couple of close people. Um, and then I found some storytelling events towards the end of 2023. And I remember having a conversation with someone, and she had seen me do some poetry, and she saw me do this little 5-minute story, and she's like, you need to do a one-woman show. She planted a seed. I'm like, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. She's like, no, the way you tell your story is so, it's unique. And then I had some opportunities to do some longer curated stories. And then I went to the San Diego Fringe Festival in 2024, so a year ago, and I saw some incredible one-person shows, some mostly women, but also some men. And I'm like, oh, maybe I could take my storytelling, the curated storytelling, and also, and I knew that the poetry I had written in my first year of transition really told a story of that first year. There's several sort of building block poems that uh, I joke and I say I can tell you how I came out. I can I can recite you a 3-minute poem, or I could probably talk for 15 minutes, but you'll hear the same story, but in an economy of words. It's one of my favorite poems to perform with small groups. And um, so the woman who we our paths crossed a few more times, and after Fringe Festival, I had an opportunity for a poetry headline that was going to be about a 30-minute performance. And I did the first iteration of what I now call Alicia's Light. And it was mostly my poems, and I had a few little things I kind of talked about. And then I had this incredible opportunity. I already knew I was already in the Fringe Festival. I was developing the show. It was going to be storytelling and poetry. And then I got an opportunity to work with Diversionary Theater in San Diego, which is an LGBTQ theater company that's been around for 40 plus years. And they wanted LGBTQ people over the age of 50 to bring our individual stories, and then we made them a theatrical presentation. So in a course of 6 weeks, basically doing like a boot camp in theater, which I had never done, I hadn't performed before 2023, let alone, anything more than, reading my poetry at this point in time and doing a couple of stories. And so I got to learn how to play myself as a character. And it just gave me a whole new light on how to do the narrative parts. So what I've done in my show is recreate some of those conversations with my wife, some of the conversations with my mom, and weave in and out of the show as I go from poem to more of a narrative part. I ask the audience questions that are very relatable because I really want them to feel that this isn't just a gender transition, it's a transformation. And one of the questions is, has the fear of rejection ever held you back from trying something new? And my goodness, there's so many things that the fear of rejection held me back from. But the biggest thing was sharing my writing and getting up and reading or performing it in front of anyone else. And that was probably the biggest barrier that really just opened things up for me. Um, and I got a chance to do the show 5 times at the San Diego International Fringe Festival. And now I've been talking to some people about some one-off opportunities. And I was not prepared to go on the fringe circuit, which a lot of people I met at San Diego, they were doing like 3 or 4 festivals over the course of the summer. It's like I just was going to do one and see how it went, and it went really well. And now I have this confidence to take it to a wider audience, because one of the things it does is, I think, by asking those questions and creating curating the show the way I did, every time I perform, whether it's at, at the Fringe Festival or at an open mic, I always end up with conversations with, strangers afterwards, and sometimes friends who hadn't seen me perform or hadn't heard, some of my work. And it's that's I live for those moments, because that's when people's minds, their preconception about what a transgender person is and what they just experienced might be different. And maybe that means that their attitude will change. Maybe the next time they hear someone say something about what transgender is or isn't, they'll say, no, this is not my experience. And that's what I'm hoping to do with my show and my just individual performances of storytelling and show and poetry.
What are the biggest fears that people have? Because, I mean, your transformation is one of the biggest probably fears that one can have is a huge change, right? But we all consider our fears to be the biggest one, obviously, because it's our own obstacle. So what are the biggest fears that people have told you about?
I think that's where we have a lot of commonality with our fears. Like right now, we've become very complacent in Western culture about having this certain standard of living that we can attain if we have a full-time job, and we feel that we have governments that I mean, a year ago I would have told you, the American government, they may not support human rights everywhere in the world. They don't have a great track record, but at home the track record's been improving, and all of a sudden, we come to a new era and it's backtracking again. And it's something I feel like people are having a hard time. They're still living their daily lives as they were, even as things are eroding around. I'm hyper vigilant, about what's happening with transgender people in this country and all over the world right now. Um, and I understand it may not have affected me yet, but I know it could at any point in time. And I think there are so many things that we felt were guaranteed, that when all of a sudden they're looking a little murky or even very black and white, like they're disappearing, like we don't know what's safe anymore. And that makes it harder and more anxious for everyone to be in the world right
Mm,
now. And I think in California, especially, um, I'm not worried about my human rights, but I'm worried about people's ability to maintain their housing. I call it a real estate crisis. People say it's a housing crisis. It's a real estate crisis because we have investors that are driving up the prices of all real estate, which means every business gets more expensive, which means they have to raise their prices in order for them to pay rent. And everything gets more expensive, and I feel like so many people are just living on the edge of possibly, being unhoused, um, or, having to dip into their life savings just to pay for everyday things. So um, that's my greatest fear, is that people are going to go into despair over all of this, and having a government that's going the wrong direction on all of those things right now. And, governments around the world taking cues from each other. I feel like our president isn't the only strong man that's come in or been elected recently. It's happening all over the world right now, and what we thought were solid democracies. And I think part of that is, it's like there are people who feel like, well, if I have a strong leader, they'll protect me. It's like, no, that doesn't
mm.
it's never worked that way.
No, unfortunately not. What would you tell people who are afraid of letting go, whatever it is that they need to let go to be true to themselves, whatever it is?
One of the ways I publicize my show during Fringe Festival, you get many opportunities to stand up at other people's performances, and they had an opening night. and you get to, sort of give a little synopsis of your show and a message. And I said, because my transition started out from making one small change that I thought was just going to make me a little bit happy, and it turned out to be a huge change. And that was leaning into this idea that I wanted to wear women's clothing and just saying I can do this without shame. I've felt this before. I know I've thought this before. I've maybe even experimented a little bit with it before, but I'm just going to make this one small change. And that led to floodgates. And I'm not saying that that will work for everyone,
Mhm.
but being willing to make a change that you think is going to lead to some intrinsic happiness, there's probably more to it than you think there is. And it might lead to the next decision to make, and it might lead to a new pathway. And maybe that one small change is maybe, this transition could have been different if I just decided finally, like, hey, I've been writing for years. Why don't I just try to get published? And maybe I got published. Maybe that could have been the pathway. Because that would have been a small change I could have made. It's like there was a lot of people who had confidence in me, not me sort of being the one big deterrent. I knew I was a good writer. I just didn't have confidence that it was other people would be really want to read it. And I think that when you're open to that, change it can build momentum. And it doesn't have to be, I have to get from 0 to 100. Maybe it's 0 to 10. Maybe that changes something inside me that I'm willing to take more risk or more and invite more change into my life. But I think so many people are afraid to even take that first step. And I was one of them, and I was that person for decades. So I get it.
Mhm.
And that's where I feel like mine was gender transition, but I think for other people, and that just opened the door to so many other things that have changed in my life. But I think it's like, just go ahead and do it. Make that small change, embrace it. And if it's something that maybe you feel a little conflicted about or shame about, go in with the mindset, I'm going to do it without shame and see how this feels.
It seems to be the place of less resistance and whatever gives you joy, right? Whatever little thing that gives you joy.
Yeah, we don't have enough joy in the world.
No, that's true.
If we can create it for ourselves, we're at least making ourselves a little better. And I'll tell you, if you create joy for yourself, it is contagious.
It really is. I think that's a huge key. Let's make joy for ourselves, and it will be contagious. Alicia, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Is there anything else you would like to tell us more about your upcoming shows?
Right now, I have some ideas in development, but nothing concrete. Although I do have this really great opportunity. Um, I'm going to be for Pride. There's a retirement home that's local, and they wanted some transgender women to read from this script that was. It was a script that was uh, basically a play that was based on interviews with transgender women, a range of them. And so I get to do that. And I just found out the person who's organizing it is someone who has decades running a theater, and she just moved to San Diego, and she's retiring here. We're going to meet for lunch, and I have a feeling that that's going to lead to some other
Okay.
things for me. So and that's just how I feel things have played out. I'm excited we'll be filming the second half of the documentary and at the end of August. And I know that we're developing some pieces for that. That's the short term, kind of through the end of the summer. And I also want to sit down as the summer goes along and start outlining my first memoir, which I think it's going to be probably about my first 2 or 3 years in transition. By the time I get going, this year, 2025, has been so transformational. 2023 was an amazing year. 2024 somehow was better, and 2025 is somehow better than 2024.
Wow.
I would never
Okay.
expect that because there's just different things, and it's the level that I'm experiencing things. So I think I really do need to. I've written a whole lot in the last 3 years. I need to get it into a body of work. And I know someone who works with folks who are interested in writing their memoirs. So when I have more of a not a full manuscript, but a true outline. I want to get together with her and see what, how we can collaborate. So that's what's on the horizon right now. And again, looking for opportunities to do my one woman show, and probably will get more into the fringe circuit next year. Don't know if this show will change a little bit, but certainly one round was not enough.
Well, I think it's a good idea to sit down and think during the summer, because the energies are for that, to contemplate what we want to
Yes.
do and achieve, so that the energies of 2026 will be more like fire and doing. Now is more like, let's contemplate and see where I want to go. So
I love that. I feel I haven't had enough of that the first half of this year. So
mhm,
this month has been sort of slowing down, but not quite getting to the contemplative stage. Maybe that'll be starting next month, really thinking about things a lot more and planning. And um, that would be a beautiful way for this year to finish out.
absolutely, that's what the planets are inviting us to do. Where can we find you online? How can we see your work?
Yeah, so the best place to find me online is on Instagram, at Alisha R 1976. That's ALISHA R 1976. No spaces or dashes or anything. And I have a YouTube channel, but I post everything through Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm going to officially launch that, as well as a website that's also on the plans for this summer,
Awesome.
where you can find my content and also where I'm performing and things like that. But right now, it's sort of a one-stop shop, Instagram.
Okay, lovely. We'll share it on the description of the show. Thank you
Great.
so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you and meeting you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be the first English interview on your show.
Yes, I will always remember you for that, for opening up
Thank
the
you.
the doors to the English speaking world. Thank you so much, and all the best with those things coming up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me and giving yourself to this experience. You can find all platforms for this podcast in the description, so please subscribe to the ones you like the most. Your essence is cosmic. You are a celestial being, a cosmic traveler, a vessel for the light and pure consciousness. With all my love.